Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to The Good Tree, the place inspired by the verse in the Quran of a good word that is like a good tree, whose roots are firm and branches reach great heights. You are joined by your hosts, myself, Fizza and Noor.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. This series is all about how we can perfect our morals in all of our relationships. In today's episode, we will be discussing our relationship with the environment.
We are pleased to be joined today with Sayyid Hasan Ali Rizvi. Sayyid Hasan was born and raised in New Jersey. He graduated with a major in political science and a minor in computer science. He also graduated from the Imam Ali Seminary in Florida before continuing his studies in the Islamic sciences at the seminary in Qom. He has a keen interest looking at Western ideologies through the lens of Islamic philosophy and mysticism. Sayyid Hasan currently serves as the resident scholar for the Husseini Islamic Centre in Orlando, Florida. Sayyid Hasan Ali Rizvi, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to The Good Tree.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you so much for the kind invitation and the opportunity to be able to speak with both of you today.
Alhamdulillah, thank you. The Holy Quran is full of lessons on how we can learn from the past. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in chapter 30, verse 41, "Corruption has appeared in both land and sea, because of what people's own hands have brought, so that they may taste something of what they have done, so that hopefully that they will turn back." With the current discussions on global climate change, increase in forest fires, ice caps melting, and farmers' protests, it's easy to understand this verse in light of human greed, arrogance, and ignorance. But the same human has the ability to build a sustainable civilization should one pause and reflect on one's actions towards this incredible planet Earth. This is probably an area we don't talk much about, but Islam truly does. So Sayyidina, to begin with, we understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this world as a trust, an amana. So can you explain to us what is our responsibility towards the environment?
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. I think for this discussion, and I think this would probably apply to most discussions when we're talking about responsibilities, having a wazifa and a duty towards something or someone, especially us as trying to identify as Muslims, good Muslims, practicing Muslims, mu'min, mu'mineen, things like that. And usually the discussion makes sense to begin by talking about a reframing and reorienting or refocusing our outlook on reality. Because if we're looking at it from, as we're going to go to, I guess later, right, the kind of problems that we see with the environment and our relationship with it, usually those problems stem from our misunderstanding of how the relationship should be and what our duty actually is. So it makes sense then that we talk about, okay, well, what kind of lens should we use to view reality in that sense, right? Like what role does the environment actually have in that sense? So in the modern world, basically, we talk about things and things are discussed as disconnected, separated, and separate entities, right? I'm looking at a laptop, this microphone, my phone, the tree, laws of gravity, everything's seen as some sort of disconnected, separate entity. Nothing really has that connection. Now, yeah, if you talk to maybe some like leftist hippie, they'll talk about, everything is all one and the universe is, it's all together and this divine cosmos. I mean, they may not use the word divine like we would, but they try to bring it together, the interconnectedness of everything. So there's a part of it we would take from there. I mean, not the kind of full like left hippie stuff, but at least that part is we need to understand that if we're going to see the environment and everything else that we deal with as Muslims as something separate, then that's not going to give us that pure, full divine picture, that kind of metaphysical picture that we need to use. One maybe good framework to use is that instead of seeing, again, a bunch of separate entities, instead of viewing the world through this lens of multiplicity that, exists in the modern or postmodern world, one of the best ways to kind of start off is just seeing as two things, as khaliq and makhluq, as creator and created. That's it. And of course, the more you open it up, you see it as, Allah being, the divine essence, this pure, holy, pure being, and then everything being a reflection of that pure essence, like the names of Allah. Okay. So that maybe we'd have to kind of think about and think, okay, well, what does that entail? So now, all right, all this fancy metaphysical stuff, all right, that's fine. What does it mean for now a Muslim, right? Like sometimes we get lost in all these theoretical, abstract, metaphysical discussions. Okay, where's the practical aspect? And I think that was mentioned, like what do we mean by being a good Muslim in terms of seeing the cosmos or everything else as connected to God and a reflection of God, right? Okay. So let's focus on maybe two characteristics that I think, we wouldn't argue that these are traits that a good Muslim would need. One would be adil, right? Or adillah, right? So a Muslim needs to be just. And then, of course, they need to be sadiq, they need to be truthful and honest. But I think that the way that normally we would identify and explain those concepts, right? Just being adil or sadiq, being just or doing justice or fighting injustice, and being sadiq, meaning being truthful. I think there's more to it, especially when the ulama open the discussion up. They say, look, if we look at, for example, the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen, alayhi salam, then, adl is putting things in its right place, right? So now, if we carry this back to the larger context of the discussion, that, okay, the cosmos, everything that's a part of it, has intelligent beings such as ourselves, human beings, jinn, and all these other living creatures that don't possess the same level of intellect that we have. It has these inanimate objects too. Then there's these sort of laws that kind of pervade everything. And of course, again, they all have this sort of relationship with Allah. What is the role for all of those objects in terms of the way that Allah has created it? If I want to understand what my duty is with these specific objects, so for our conversation, it's the environment, right? Trees and air and water and everything like this. I need to understand, what role does water have in God's eyes? What role do trees have in God's eyes? Right? So it's kind of a reframing, usually in modernism, they talk about the kind of subject-object relationship, that we are the subject and we view the outside world as the object, right? This is, very prominent and very strict, like sort of empirical sciences. We're just examining what's going on out there. But for a good Muslim, when they're reframing everything, it should be that, look, Allah is the actually only subject and we are all his objects in that sense too. So it's a complete reframing of how we want to view the environment as being a part of like one of God's objects or reflections. So being just in that sense means, where does God see the trees or see the environment or see the water or air or space or the planets? We have to understand, given his perspective as the creator and putting everything where it belongs, what is my duty now as a good Muslim to put it and also make sure that it goes into its rightful place? Then going back with the concept of sidq or being sadiq. Again, normally we take the superficial idea that, okay, just tell the truth, don't lie. I mean, that's what we tell in Sunday school, right? That's for kids. But sidq and being a sadiq is beyond that. Only one realm of truth and truthfulness is saying the truth. But if you look in the books, they say, look, there's many different realms. One is about thinking and feeling and understanding the truth, meaning you have to have a good picture of reality, which again is tying into what we're saying. We have to understand, how does Allah want us to see reality? Not the way that, again, maybe some post-enlightenment philosopher has talked about, or modern day environmentalist or a leftist or a right, whatever, different philosophers or ideologies are that exist right now. We don't want to see it through their eyes. We need to understand that, Islam, as it's, said in a very cliche way, it's, way of life. But in a sense, it's trying to give us a lens to show us this is how reality actually looks. This is reality in reality, right? In that sense. So being a sadiq is living reality. And everything you do is trying to get everything to go to its truthful place in kind of reality, qua reality. That's what a good Muslim needs to do. So, I mean, to use kind of modern, let's say modern like slang or terminology, it's literally being real. Everybody wants to, you should be real about it. Okay, let's be real. You have to understand what real means and then act upon that and put things where they belong. So the two questions and duties that a Muslim then would need to do to start their kind of practical journey is, okay, in reality, who am I then? Me as a created thing, as part of the cosmos, as a being with an aql, right, this consciousness, awareness, and intellect. What are my specific roles and divine responsibilities? Yes, I'm a Muslim, or I'm a Shia Muslim, or a Shia Muslim male, Shia Muslim female. All these, things are there. But every single individual with their own specific qualities and characteristics, given their soul, they're going to have specific duties that Allah expects of them and only them, in order to help put the cosmos back where it belongs. And, the verse that you mentioned in the beginning, it's interesting, right? Because it says, Zahar al-Fasad. Fasad, it can be translated a lot of different ways. Corruption is one. One of the ways that I'm not keen on English translations, but I think one that comes close is chaos. And when you think about chaos, you think of things outside of harmony, right? It's just, it's not in equilibrium. And that's exactly what we're trying to go after. Because the opposite of fasad is sulh or salah. And sulh, again, sometimes we translate that as treaty or this and that, but it actually seems more so to be a better translation would be to be in harmony, to be in a state of equilibrium. Or again, things in reality, how they should actually be. And so for a good Muslim or a striving Muslim, the first thing then is, in reality, who am I? That's the first question they have to kind of figure it out, so that they can determine their role in God's greater plan. Like I'm just, God wrote the script. How do I act out that? How do I act that out? And then in order for them to understand that, they'll need to have a strong understanding. Okay, well, who is Allah then? Because it's Allah and me, right? We're the two pieces of the puzzle in that sense. So we'll have to figure that out. And both of those are, very eloquently described in the famous narration that everybody knows, right? Man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabba, right? From Amir al-Mu'mineen, alayhi salam. If you understand your own nafs, your soul, yourself, your true identity, the way that it's meant to be understood, then faqad arafa rabba, then you'll understand your Rabb. And what's interesting is, Allama Hasan Ali, hafadahullah, he has at least, I think, 99 different interpretations of this hadith itself, right? There's a lot of depth to this. One of them is very interesting because usually when people talk about this, right, they usually say whoever knows themselves, they know, their Lord. So they talk about, you'll know Rabb, Allah. But he says one of the interpretations is that this particle, the who that comes at the end of Rabb, it's that you're saying, if you come to understand yourself, then you'll understand your specific Rabb, meaning your specific duty that you have and only you have towards Allah. So I think with that in mind, that can give us a kind of a starting procedure to see, okay, the environment is there. It's part of the greater cosmos. It's a reflection of God. I've got a specific duty towards that. I need to figure out what that is, given the God-given skills that I have in that God has provided me in my life.
Ahsan Sayyidina, I love how you zoomed out and you brought us back to, the essence of the question, which is what are we doing here and what's our responsibility in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thank you so much. So following on from that, something that I've always wondered about is that many of our prophets were shepherds. And they worked with animals, they worked with the earth. So what does this tell us then about how our relationship with the earth and animals or the environment as a whole should be?
So, and I know the typical response to when, there's questions posed like, oh, that's a really interesting question. It's a good question. And I don't mean it to be insincere. But I'm saying that because this is actually sincere from me, is that it actually is, one of those questions that really does sit on people's minds. And it was always on my mind, like, why these jobs? And I think people have tried to offer their responses for that. So I had to do, just a little bit of research to kind of figure this out. I didn't get, in-depth research, but, a few points that what I found from some ulama was really, was interesting for me. So one thing is that apparently in both Sunni and Shia books, there are narrations which apparently allude to the fact that all prophets either, well, at the very minimum, all of them had some relationship with animals. And some of them say that specifically relationships, they were shepherds, meaning in terms of sheep. So, what you'll find in both Shia and Sunni books, slightly different wording, but it's pretty much the same. Like this one from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ma min nabiyyin illa waqad ra'a al-ghanam. That there is no prophet except that they were shepherds, pretty much, right? That they were taking care and they're caretakers of sheep. And of course, in our books, in some narration collections, they have small sections dedicated to why that was the case. So I actually found something else which was interesting, which I think most people, if they were to think about it, this is probably the conclusion that they would reach as well, right? That this one, I think it comes from Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, "Ma ba'ath Allah nabiyan qatta." Allah doesn't send a prophet except and only that yastarihu al-ghanim, except that again he's a shepherd who takes care of sheep, and then he gives the reason for why that's the case. Apparently, right? Yu'allamuhu bidhalik ra'iyatun nas. It's so that they can learn how to be caretakers or shepherds of human beings. So that's one of the first things that I've heard when I looked into some of the commentaries by both Sunni and Shia ulama, is that because they are, as even Christians talk about this too, right? The prophets, they're shepherds, and they're the human beings are the flock. So we hear this all the time in terms of khilafah, right? It's like almost as if we're saying that, or at least what it's being said over here is that the prophets needed some sort of lived experience, right? They needed experiential knowledge in terms of, okay, you have to take care of humans. Humans are, like animals, pretty much. So if you can handle dealing with animals, then maybe you'll deal with some of these, these human beings. Because you can give all the different analogies, right? You have these wolves wanting to attack the flock. So a prophet needs to protect their flock from, the wolves in society, like shaitan and shayateen and things like that. So that seemed to be one of the major answers that, at least I found. Some of the other, interesting points of reflection that I saw from some ulama is, so, I mean, think of the concept of sheep itself first. So in our sort of Western idea and thinking patterns right now, if somebody were to compare a human to a sheep, what would like come to your mind?
Follow the flock, can't think for themselves.
Exactly, right? So it's got a negative connotation. Nobody wants to be told that you're just being a sheep, right? It's usually being told, especially in a philosophical, religious, or political context, like you guys are just a bunch of sheep, right? That's how people are. They just follow whatever's in front of them. So it's used very negatively, and we're told, or at least people say, don't be a sheep. What's interesting is that, again, what some ulama seem to be focusing on, especially those who were more into the metaphysical tradition, is that what it seems here is that Allah seems to be saying, no, you need to be sheep. See, yes, we have our aql, we have our thinking and our awareness and all that stuff, free will and all that stuff aside. They say one of the points here is more about what a sheep represents. It represents that they have full trust and faith in their shepherd and the one who's leading them, and they will follow that sheep or that the shepherd wherever they go. And say that that's how a mu'min or Muslim needs to be. When they have their khalifa, their shepherd, their imam, they should follow them without question, right? Sami'na wa ata'na. We hear and we obey. So they say that that's actually what we need to do. Is that goes with the idea of ubudiyya and servitude. So yeah, maybe parts of the idea of just kind of blindly following things, maybe that's not exactly what we mean. But when we find the right leader, of course, in the grand scheme of things, it's Allah, the prophets, the Ahlul Bayt, the imams, and then of course righteous ulama too, right? In that sense. So we do see that there is an emphasis on trying to figure out, find those righteous leaders and follow them. Now, some of these, again, these are some of the points that I had found. So, regarding the question, it didn't seem like it really talked about the environment, so to speak. Now, this is just kind of, speculation on my part. My guess would be, I guess, again, this is an assumption, because I didn't really find much evidence for this, but like, let's say somebody goes and, they slaughter an actual animal. Most of us, I don't know about you, I've never slaughtered an animal, right? So burgers or, yeah, anything that I've eaten, it's been somebody else who's done the dirty work. And, when there is that disconnect, it seems like we are much more likely to be neglectful and abusive of that relationship, right? With the earth and with the environment. And that's why, a lot of people recommend that, okay, if you go and, garden yourself or, slaughter your own meat or whatever it is, there'll be a different sense and a sort of appreciation, a sort of maybe an environmental empathy, right? Something like that, if we want to use that kind of phrase, a cosmic empathy. Because you're, with that increased investment in the cosmos, in makhluqat, in creation, you get entangled with everything. It becomes a part of your greater, created family, not just, humans, or, for some of us, it becomes very small. It's only, Shias who think just like us. But then our hadith say, no, you expand that. Not just Shias who think just like you, right? With your same marja, whatever, and same political ideology, expand it a little bit. And then even there, the more and more expansive you get, one of our teachers in Qom had said this, that because I think in one of our sessions, they were talking about, how they were asking this Ustad Akhlaq, teacher of Akhlaq. In some narrations, it says you need to take care of, be kind and take care of the needs and desires of like Muslims and mu'mins. We see these various narrations. And then it talks about animals, plants, whatever. So it says all these things. Well, how do we know we're not taking care of the wrong ones? Like, where do we know what the limits are? And the teacher responded with something that, I'll never forget. It was such a it was almost obvious, but it was mind-blowing just to hear it from him. And he had said that, look, if Allah is not creating these lines and limits and boundaries, why are you creating it? If Allah is not giving you these conditions that only these kind of mu'mineen you need to respect or tolerate or show love to, only these kind of Muslims or these kinds of animals, whatever, then why are you creating these artificial variables, artificial barriers and borders? So it seemed as though what this Ustad was saying is that the more and more we really, because for some of us, we require that. Again, the abstract is not enough. That if we have that, actual physical relationship, we live through these things. Again, whether it's being around animals, keeping pets, planting things, then we are now more invested in that relationship. And when we do that, then again, that maybe that cosmic or created empathy becomes stronger in us. And then we are less likely to. So the reminder, of course, is of Allah, that this is Allah's creation. And then it goes back to what we were saying before is, okay, I do have a divine obligation towards this creation of God. I'm a creation. This is also creation. I'm now, ta'lif al-qulub, right? Our hearts, so to speak, are coming together, right? Our literal hearts and their kind of spiritual, metaphorical hearts. Something like that, maybe.
Ahsant, I really like that focus on appreciation, and it's true. Anything in life, when you work on it yourself, you're going to appreciate it. So imagine a relationship with the environment or an animal. So following on from that, you said something about us humans creating borders or boundaries, barriers. We can use any of those words. So there's been a big push recently with vegetarianism and veganism, and all in the name of caring for the resources that we have on our planet and not, being heedless. But at the same time, we have a hadith that tell us a mu'min must eat meat once every 40 days. So how do we, as good, responsible Muslims, balance the two?
So I think maybe the initial sort of way to think about this question, because I mean, it's possible that maybe some of the individuals who are, listening, they may be self-professed vegans or vegetarians, right? So the idea here is not to offend anybody if that's, what they've chosen, but it's more to think about, because, and this doesn't just, I don't think the answer that or response that we'll, I guess, offer in a few minutes, it's not just related to this discussion about, vegetarianism or veganism or whatever it is, but in general, the sort of way that we've developed our ideas throughout time has because we have a very specific framework and an outlook of how to approach ideas. And sometimes that ends up where we just take a certain conclusion or an idea or a goal that's been given from the outside somewhere, maybe by an alim, it's possible, from somewhere else, and we kind of latch onto that. So we become, in that sense, very goal-oriented or idea or response-oriented. One of the issues and things that, a lot of those who I share sort of ideological Islamic thinking framework is that Muslims really need to work on more of, not again that goal-oriented thinking, but more of the process-oriented thinking. How did I actually reach that conclusion in the first place? So again, just to give an example outside of this one is, if somebody believes that hijab's not wajib, I'm like, look, I'm not going to judge you for it. Okay, if that's what you do, I'd like to know how you came to that conclusion. What framework, what epistemology are you using? What allowed you, with the Quran there, with the hadith there, with the lived experience of all of the ulama from both the Sunni and Shia schools, like, show me, how did you come to that conclusion, right? Because I'm not going to toss out the possibility, but I need to see how you reached it. So it doesn't matter what your conclusion is to me. It can be anything. You want to tell me that, wine and gambling is halal? Fine. I need to see your evidence for it. I need to see your approach. In the same way, I think most people, they're not ready to do that. Right? And this is something basically they discuss in psychology too. If you question somebody about these things, they usually don't understand the causal epistemic process that led them to those conclusions that they thought that they've reached rationally. But instead, usually it's just an argument, appeal to authority or common sense, whatever that means. So again, the reason I wanted to introduce that idea is for the same thing. It can be applied here. How did somebody come to the conclusion that Islam, if they want to use that framework as a Muslim or a mu'min, they would want to say, I'm sure that they're doing this for the sake of God, right? I'm sure any practicing Muslim would want to say that they're doing this because that's what they feel Islam is pushing them towards, not because they made it up on their own. I haven't, any Muslim vegan or vegetarian that I've talked to, I've never heard them use, directly an outside framework. They try to frame it within, Islamic lines. So I said, okay, if that's the case, then, one response is, as you had given, sister, right, is, okay, the Prophet had, and all the Imams, all the, throughout history, they've all been mediators. And, some of them, it's not just that, once every 40 days and kind of the bare minimum, because what we see from the narrations is that that's the bare minimum. But for some of the Imams, I believe maybe like the 5th and 6th Imam, if I'm not mistaken, I'd have to double check, but some of them, they were known to love meat. They said they used to be, on the sort of table spread, right? The sufra, whatever you want to call it. They would sit with, a pot of meat in front of them in, the kind of Arab style in that sense, just picking out and just eating it like that. So how would somebody be able to answer that, right? Now, again, sometimes the response is that, well, the animals were treated in the right way. That's why it's okay. So the response usually that's given to that criticism is that, well, no, the prophets and imams knew where the, meat was coming from. They knew that it was, ethical, harvesting or slaughtering, whatever it happens to be. I said, okay, if that's the response you want to offer, then you're going to have to provide evidence for that, right? That it's a claim. I haven't seen any evidence. As far as I've seen, yes, we have the recommendations, of course, that, we can find in any fiqh book in your ahkam that animals should be given water. They shouldn't be tortured. They shouldn't be, other animals shouldn't see them being slaughtered. So we have all these. But I've never seen it anywhere that the Prophet had seen all this or the Imams had seen all this. And because of that, they said, I'm not having that meat. Maybe the evidence exists, but I haven't seen it. So for me, when I see somebody offering that argument, I said, look, I don't see the Islamic argument being made. It seems as though you have your own ethical framework that you seem to be forcing on in the Islamic tradition. That's what it seems like. So if you want to take a modernist or postmodernist approach to this, I said, fine, but I don't like when things are force-fed into Islam, right? You don't want to be force-fed meat? Fine. Nobody's going to force you to eat meat, but don't force-feed veganism or vegetarianism into Islam when it's not a part of it at all. And yes, and it's a separate question about the kind of ethical treatment of animals. But even for that part of it, I think even there's other questions that need to be answered by those who profess this sort of vegetarianism or veganism. That okay, if the typical idea that at least I've heard, and if you have heard different ones, you can share. But usually I hear, look, they feel we don't want to harm animals; they're living beings, so we shouldn't be harming them. I said, okay, so your definition of life then is limited to two things. It's humans and animals. And because these are two life-possessing or conscious creations or beings, they, possess the ability to feel. Therefore, we shouldn't be, harming. And this would be more so, I guess, for vegans, more so than vegetarians, right? In the extreme sense. I said, okay, that's fine. But is that framework for consciousness, awareness, and pain, again, something that's described in Islamic metaphysics? It doesn't seem like that's the case. In fact, I'd say it's more so than that, right? If we're saying, يُسَبِّحُ لِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ, we're saying that every single thing in creation is doing tasbih of Allah. Everything is conscious. Everything has awareness of Allah. So why are you limiting it? Again, this hypothetical kind of straw vegan or vegetarian straw person. Why are you limiting it to animals? Why are you eating plants? When even from an empirical standpoint, they possess life. And, I've seen some articles that talk about the quote unquote pain that they feel, whatever that means. Again, water. It's a meme, but I've seen this as sort of a response to, I'm sure you've seen it, right? The response to vegetarians and vegans is that, how could you destroy and drink from the house of a fish? Like, you're so insensitive. And there's a point there. It's meant to be humorous, but what is the actual line? And usually what you see with these sort of frameworks, there's no coherency. Again, there's no epistemic coherency. If you really don't want to harm anything that has consciousness and awareness, then you can't do anything. This chair that I'm sitting on right now, I'm harming it because it is conscious and is aware. And I'm not that heavy, but if me sitting on it, I'm sure it doesn't enjoy that. Again, that's the framework that they're trying to use. And I say that that doesn't seem like it's a correct framework to use. The other side is that, look, let's say they do feel pain, everything, including animals. Let's say that happens. We happen to have narrations which talk about that's what animals want. They actually have that desire, but with conditions. So we have some that, I can't recall which imam, but one of them talks about, I think, apples. And it talks about how the imam said that the kamal, the perfection of food, I think specifically this is an apple, was that a mu'min were to eat the apple so it becomes a part of that person's flesh, a part of their soul, and that mu'min can take that apple towards Jannah with them. Now that is a metaphysical outlook, is that this thing becomes a part of you and you are helping it out by taking it, to Jannah, get closer to Allah in that sense, because that apple can't do it on its own, so to speak. Now, whether a person wants to accept that framework or not, again, that's up to them to decide. But again, going back to what we were originally saying, this idea of vegetarianism and veganism, it doesn't seem like we can apply it anywhere within an Islamic framework. Again, ethical slaughtering, okay, we understand that. But the idea of feelings and everything, it doesn't seem like that would really work in terms of, what their responses would be. But again, if you heard different responses and other back and forth, then, please share. Because that's the kind of most that I've heard.
I think those are really interesting questions you've raised. And I think they really make you think about why you're doing something, because it's really easy to just say, oh yeah, it makes sense, and not really think properly about your reasoning for doing it. And I really liked the example you gave about the apple, because actually one of my akhlaq teachers, when we were complaining to him, we were saying, so why aren't we vegetarian? I thought we're supposed to be good people who care about animals. And he said, it was a very short response, but he was like, animals are put on this earth to worship Allah. And when you're eating them and you're getting closer to them just because of the energy they supply you with, then that's their service to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's almost this circle of giving. And it was very interesting to see it from that point of view. So thank you for that.
Alhamdulillah.
I think the other thing about vegetarianism and veganism, a lot of people talk about climate change, like not eating because of climate change. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, that goes into the sort of general conversation about our effects to the environment itself, right? And how we're supposed to understand that. So one thing is that, and I guess it goes back to the other point that was raised too, is that we have been put on here to survive and thrive, right? I mean, we're the chosen ones, right? Yeah, I mean, animals are great, plants are great, water, all that stuff is nice, planets, and if there are aliens and jinn, that they have their own duties in the universe. But we are the ones who got the karama, right? We're the lucky chosen species and race. And Allah has said, I'm making everything subservient to you. All of this is here, as Sister Noor was saying. This is all here for you to be able to reach your kamal, right? That's the point of us being created, is use these things. I mean, it's interesting how almost very literally, it seems like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is using various analogies, like ad-dunya mazra'atul akhirah. Like this place is our pasture or our farmyard. It's our garden to plant for the next world. So we plant things and then we harvest them, we eat them, we use them to develop that spiritual energy to get us to that kamal, right? So the physical is that vehicle, that medium. And we see this a lot in Quranic and narrative language too. This idea of having a something that you ride upon, right? It talks about, if you meant, I mean, for the Arabs, obviously this is a big deal, like talking about horses and camels. It wasn't just something that you ride upon, but, they were used for many different things. So many different barakat, so many different blessings would stem from just these few animals. And so then it became a point of reflection and everything. So where the issue seems to come about is when we go beyond the means, right? When we go beyond what we need to. And even those who talk about the idea of climate change, greenhouse gases, and all those things, usually the conversation, and again, I haven't seen every single environmentalist or every single sort of pro-climate change person's arguments, but usually they'll say that, look, it's our interference with the environment that this has taken place. So I said, okay, if that's the case, is it simply us using in things, or is it the misuse and abuse? Are we using too much? So usually they talk about, look, we're too reliant on fossil fuels. Not that fossil fuels in and of themselves would be bad, but it's more of a conversation of, well, how much can we actually expend and use? Okay, maybe that's one thing. Now about using, grazing animals and things like that. So I'm not an expert in this, but I've heard competing research. The sort of what methane that's given off by animals. If we reduce that, then it'll help this. So what I've seen, and again, this could be wrong, so I stand to be corrected, is that, look, even if everybody switches and goes vegan or vegetarian, whatever, and they stop this, they say, look, the actual positive or reverse effect is insignificant, right? There's other ways to actually go about doing that. And there's a pragmatic reason they give that. They say, look, because of the sort of benefits that you get from meat itself. So let me take a pause here. So I'm somebody that's into nutrition myself, right? So I've been doing a keto diet for like 3-4 years now. And especially with the Islamic perspective, there seems to be a value in meat by itself. And those who are, let's say, not just who don't agree with veganism, but who are anti-vegan or anti-vegetarian, they say that, look, if you go pro-vegan or pro-vegetarian, there is based on the scientific evidence that they present, not forgetting the metaphysical argument, they say that there are certain vitamins and nutrients that you cannot get. The sort of bioavailability, the absorption, it doesn't happen from plants. And that's why they say, in order to have that same level of nutrients that would come from, let's say, red meat or white meat, whatever, you would have to supplement it with some sort of vitamins and minerals, and those won't have the same bioavailability and absorption readily absorbable to the body as meats would. Again, that doesn't mean like have, filet mignon every day. That's not the idea. But the thing is that it seems Allah's already, again, he's put these specific items in place for a reason. But again, with specific restrictions and conditions. So now to take more of a metaphysical aspect to kind of tie it into climate change. If everybody had been eating, let's say, the mustahab or recommended amount, or maybe even just eating a little bit more than they needed to, then there would be so many other effects to both people's souls, and then of course extended out to the environment as well. So what a lot of metaphysicians, they talk about is that we know this, right? But the saying is, you are what you eat. So some people take that as a very, sort of metaphorical, allegorical saying. In Islamic metaphysics, it's literal. They said, look, you are what you eat, meaning it becomes a united part of your soul. There's an ittihad that's there. So one of the reasons, for example, we don't eat pig is because if you do, you get pig-like qualities. or these other animals, you get those animal-like qualities. It's interesting because so I listen to Joe Rogan's podcast. I'm a big fan of his, and he's a big person that talks about elk meat. So over there, he talks about, elks are these types of animals that, they're like warrior animals, right? They're going out, they're hunting, they're living in harsh environments. And everybody, he's like, and he says this, and anybody else that he has on the show that talks about it, they say, look, when you have elk meat, there's this natural like boost of energy. Like you feel it's like a warrior's meat. Like they talk about it like that. And that's, again, is going back to the same idea. At the same time, all right, too much of a certain type of meat or certain animal or certain other food, what can give you either the positive qualities or those negative qualities. So we have this sense of trying to balance those things out. And even now in sort of modern day nutrition, people who are not even religious, they talk about, it's very clear that we have way too much either carbs or we're having way too much in terms of animal meats, whatever it happens to be. And there really isn't as much green there. So again, whether somebody's keto or paleo or, carnivore, probably, this wouldn't apply to somebody who's doing a carnivore diet, but most of those other diets, they say, look, we're out of balance. Our bodies are out of sync. Especially when we go to, let's say, the Muslim, communities. And, I come from a Desi background. So it's almost as if by design, we eat the most unhealthy things possible. Everybody craves it. And our history is that we used to have very healthy, wholesome diets in the quote unquote older Islamic civilization world. And then maybe it's from moving over to the West. It's, or even now in the East, what they, sociologists describe as the McDonaldization of the world, right? Now we eat garbage, right? We're full of processed garbage. We're full of processed sugars and all these foods, which, people did not eat like that or didn't eat in those same quantities. So again, to take it back to the idea of climate change and to the verse that Sister Fizza that you mentioned, is one of the extensions of that fasad is literally we're eating certain things that causes fasad and chaos in our own bodies, in our souls, in our minds. Mental health can also be brought into this too. And of course, to the universe as a whole. Right there to the earth. These things will extend out and they will cause damage there. So if things were kept in equilibrium, we go back to that sulh, that harmony, then we would be able to hopefully get it back to where it belongs.
Just moving on then from there, I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on deforestation and the wildlife dependent on that ecosystem.
Deforestation. So we have a few different narrations specifically about trees itself, apparently, right? And I think just these one or two narrations seem to solve, they addresses the issue and it solves it at the same time. So one of them, again, so most of the narrations that I'm mentioning, look, I'm not an expert by any means of, a scholar of like Rijal and Hadith scientists, so I haven't authenticated any of this stuff. I'm just mentioning them, let's say, as points to think about, because I know that some individuals who may be listening in, they may say, where'd you grab this stuff from? I said, look, I'm not saying that this is coming from the words of the Imams themselves. It's been attributed to them. And I found these in books of other ulama. So I'm using sort of that sort of epistemic framework, right? So this one that's been attributed to the first Imam, alayhi salam, and I'll just give the English here, is that cutting a tree, like especially a green and full tree, is prohibited. It's not allowed unless absolutely necessary, unless there's a darura. So if there's a necessity there, then you can cut it down. There seems to be other narrations also attributed to the 6th and 8th Imams, alayhi salam, that say also that this sort of principle that the first Imam was giving is more crucial in areas that are barren and areas that are dry, where apparently, again, they have lost that equilibrium in their locale. And they have, expanded, I guess, maybe even done the tafsir of their grandfather's saying and saying that, look, it's permitted to cut trees. And then the condition that they add is that as long as new trees are planted in their place. So again, everything seems to go with that idea of, look, fasad is only if you take something without replacing it back. Allah's provided these blessings. They're meant for us. So you take the blessing and then you give it back. It happens literally in terms of what we're saying from trees, but it happens with food as well. It happens with wealth, right? We have this in narrations too, that, Allah gives certain people more, in terms of the risk, more wealth. Their job and duty specifically is to share the wealth with everybody else. When they do that, Allah blesses them even more. When they don't do that, Allah takes that away and gives it to somebody else. And, it's interesting, without going into too much of the sort of political nature of these kind of questions, is the areas that seem to be, GDP number one and, economically superior and, hegemonies, all that, fancy stuff, the first world, quote unquote, they seem to be the ones that are feeling the fasad more than anybody else, right? In terms of mental health issues, in terms of climate change issue and all these things. Whereas everybody else in the quote unquote third world, the poor world, all these things, they don't seem to be feeling those effects as much. But again, now there is that McDonaldization that has to be taken into consideration. But again, most, at least evidence that I've seen, suggests that the other side of the world, the East, for example, it seems to be doing okay with all these things because they seem to understand that harmony that's there. And usually you'll see more greenery in those kind of places. You'll see that, a bit more of a maintenance. For those, if you've been to Iran, you'll see that that's a major thing that the government has been pushing for a while, is trying to constantly plant a lot of greenery, right? Because of the recommendation for us, it has an effect on our soul to see that greenery out there. I think, so another narration that's there too from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that, whoever plants a tree, no human being eats from it, nor any other creature of God. So even if an animal or a bug or whatever eats from it, except that planting of the tree becomes recorded as an act of charity, right? It's generosity. It's the jood, that that jawad characteristic that we want to have, right? That sadaqah that we can give. Sometimes it's actual money, sometimes it's a smile, as they say, right? Or sometimes it can be planting a tree because of the amount of reverberations, divine reverberations that it takes, that it has for building that proper ecosystem, right? Or again, that divine sort of cosmic system. So yeah, it seems like the picture that I have in mind of this is like very kind of Indiana Jones. I don't know if you've seen something like that, right? You want to take away that artifact, you have to put something in its place right away, right? Something like that. So that's what it seems like our sulh needs to be. You take something away, you need to make sure something equal or better has to be in its place. Even it's funny, even for salam, saying salam, it's the same thing. Salam, right? The Quran says either you have to reply with the equivalent or do better. So it seems like just generally in the Islamic framework is our relationship with all other creation is that you have to at least do the bare minimum, which is what they did for you. And then if you want to strive to higher levels, then you have to do better than what's been given to you.
I think that's so beautiful. Isn't that ihsan? That you do better than what was given to you.
What's interesting is ihsan is literally you're trying to beautify something, right? You're trying to make it hasan. So if somebody, this is something my wife is always adamant on, and I think it's in a lot of cultures too. Let's say somebody, they make a dish for you, right? And they put it in Tupperware or whatever, they give it to you. You can't give it back empty. You have to now make something yourself. Hopefully you have to one up them, make something better, right? If they made brownies, you do better brownies. I mean, ours will be keto brownies, obviously, right? No sugar. So we almond flour, coconut flour, all that stuff. You put it there, then you give it back. Like we're trying, I mean, again, not one up and trying to keep up with the Joneses, but again, it's ihsan, is that you did good. We're going to try to beautify it and make it even better, because that, fastabiqu bil khairat. We are always trying to compete in what is khair and best. So we are trying to make the world, the cosmos, universe as beautiful as possible, because what is this doing? It's a manifestation of the divine names. Allah has beautified all of us as contingent beings with the idea of existence. Now we try our best to respond in that same way of trying to make everything else beautiful, keeping in mind how Allah, would envision that same sort of beauty in this world.
Ahsan, thank you so much for that. Okay, so bringing it back to, how we live our lives on a day-to-day basis in our homes, what about the little things like turning off the electricity, turning off the tap during wudu, even like walking or riding bikes or using lower carbon emission cars? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think a lot of this, if we expand on the sort of framework and the answers that we've given previously, I think somebody should understand that, okay, when we talk about rizq, it's something that's allotted specifically, right? We've got these specific portions of things that we need, a specific amount of health or type of health, a specific amount and type of wealth, our families, everything around us, our environment. It's been made specifically, and we've been given the exact precise amount that we need to sustain ourselves to become perfect versions of ourselves, right? That insan kamil idea. What happens though is that we exceed those bounds, right? We cause that fasad. We go beyond the allotted rizq. And when we do that, that's what, that word that's used nowadays is exploitation, right? We exploit that rizq of others. So we take and abuse from that. And that is in these simple things like wudu. And, I don't remember which alim said it, but I remember one of them gave an example of, simple ways, because, I mean, I'll be honest, when I was growing up, the idea of wudu and, turning off the tap in between each thing, that was not a norm at all. I mean, maybe it was because, again, we were living in the first world, so we didn't We didn't have that divine empathy. Had we lived in, again, more of a desert climate or an environment where, think about like, the Palestinians or people who literally they're fighting for water. Yeah. And that's the case, your wudu has a whole different meaning to it. Your conservation of water has a whole different meaning. Us, unfortunately, or fortunately, I would say unfortunately, in the first world, we become too complacent, and exploitation or abuse or misappropriation, whatever it is, has become the norm. But yeah, we can leave the water on. And I remember when, again, I don't want to reveal my age, right? But growing up in the 90s, the sort of, so when we had our Saturday morning cartoons, usually in between or at the end, they would always have some sort of PSA, right? Some sort of, they would, even in our Saturday morning cartoons, there was some akhlaqi moral principle there. Nowadays, the kind of TV shows and stuff that are out there, they're trying to push, all this postmodern, like, nonsense, unfortunately, trying to ruin everybody's akhlaq. But at least back in the day, people had, some sort of moral, compass, and they were trying to push that on kids. So, I would be watching like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And at the end of the episode, they would be shown saying, being yelled at for leaving on the tap while they're brushing their teeth. And I'm like, oh man, the turtles, shut off the tap while they're brushing their teeth. I need to do it too. Something so simple. And somebody, used the Ninja Turtles for this. May Allah bless them and give them a great reward in Jannah. Something simple like that, to talk about the fact that, yeah, we are complacent in this idea. And I think it's very, very sad that Shias don't understand the value of water. We, better than anybody else, should understand the value of water. What is it that we keep crying about every single year in Karbala? It's water. And this is what I wanted to say before, right? This one alim, again, I don't remember who it was, said that, look, if you have some issue with water, whether it's wastage by drinking or maybe washing too much, whatever way it happens to be, even something like wudu, like, can you imagine try to imagine yourself making wudu in front of Bibi Sakina or Sukaina, Ruqayya, whichever name that you'd like to use. Like, can you imagine yourself making wudu in front of her and just sitting there wasting it, over and over again? He's like, if that doesn't get you to change, like, then there's a bigger spiritual disease in your heart. This idea of waste, again, especially of water, is something that should really be ingrained in us, and that we should make sure that not a single drop is wasted. And, it's funny, even in our fiqh, not about wudu specifically, but for ghusl, there's a specific amount that's mentioned. I don't remember it exactly, but you can find it in the books of the Maraji'. They say that if your wudu your ghusl should use no more than, X amount of water, whatever it is. They say if you use more than this for your ghusl, they say that there's ishkal. There's a chance that Allah will not accept your ghusl because you've been using too much. So this also does extend out to our fiqh, according to some of our maraji as well. So yeah, I remember the first time that, I had, thought about the idea of wudu is that somebody was, I think an alim was explaining the method of wudu from Ayatollah Khuwi, rahmatullah alayh, Imam Khomeini, rahmatullah alayh. And he was mentioning the ulama, how they would use like these small little kind of containers. They would put some water in there and then just use it like that. Most of us, if we were to, let's say, calculate the amount of water that we use and we saw the leftover afterwards, we would be shocked. We are literally probably putting away buckets and buckets and gallons of water in what we're doing. And I think sometimes people need to see that, so that visual representation. And I've always had this in my mind that, if I'm not the type of person to do that, but, somebody wants to take the idea. It's copyrighted. You have to pay me royalties. But if they, design a sink or do one of these social media experiments, just take a sink, put one of those big jugs of water under it, and have a person perform wudu as they normally would. Let them, just perform that wudu that's as they do. And then when they're done, they shut it off. They say, okay, now look at the water that's under there. And they see that jug. And then they calculate that. And then they start talking about the amount of water that, they could have given to this person in this country or over here. Again, that's a practical way for people to really visualize it. And sometimes people, need to see that. Now, less electricity. Again, this goes for water as well. Again, coming from a typical brown Desi family, for us, the idea was don't leave lights on. Why? Because the bill is going to go up. So even if you want to think about it from an economical, financial standpoint, it's a waste of money to use that extra water to have those lights on. Now, the only exception, because I used to be very, I don't want to use the word, because sometimes people use words and it can be offensive, right? But I was very particular about turning lights off constantly. It's a waste of, money, this and that. I remember I had done it in front of one of the ulama, one of my teachers, and he had said, look, that's fine, maybe during the daytime. At night, there's no israf of light, though. There's no wastage of light. I said, what do you mean? He said, because darkness is something that has an effect on the soul. So at night, it's actually a good thing to do. So if you leave lights on, he's like, that's not an issue at all. You can do that. So, I could say that I'm afraid of the dark. That's why I leave night lights on. But I'm going to use this Islamic thing as an excuse, right? That, yeah. So if you want to leave a nightlight on, outside, inside, whatever it is, it seems as though from, again, at least what my teacher had told me, and again, I didn't see the hadith that he had mentioned, but I'm taking my teacher's word for it, that because there are certain creatures and beings that thrive off of darkness, the one exception to this rule would be, okay, try to leave some sort of light in your house to invite more of the nurani, illuminated beings in that sense, right? Yeah, during the daytime, I would say, be very, very careful about that. Now, the other one about walking, riding bikes to lower carbon emission cars. I don't know. So I think that's a very specific one, and it's a very tough one too. So again, there's a lot of general principles that I think, can be mentioned, just don't waste. At the same time, in every single society, I think the ulama that are there locally, I think they should be the ones to determine that, okay, in our society, it makes sense to kind of switch to these models. But I think that it's very clear. Again, maybe, I don't know if you're both in London or whatever. I think there are certain places where it makes sense. You can get around with public transportation or riding bikes. It's not a big deal. A lot of Europe is it's designed like that too. They design bike routes specifically. It's specifically designed so that you shouldn't be driving cars, right? It's actually meant so that cars are the worst thing for you. But I mean, I'm over here in America. You're supposed to be driving like the most gas guzzling thing possible. That's the problem, right? So if the society is not really designed for it, it can actually become more of a nuisance or an inconvenience, and it might affect the other parts of their life. So I think it would, for people, let's say, if they really wanted to know what to do in their own specific lives, I think it would make sense that they talk to their own local ulama, their own spiritual advisors, to see what should they do, again, in terms of their own duties for their life. I don't know. I mean, the general ones, again, less electricity, again, during the day, turning off tap water, using less water, especially during wudu and ghusl. Those, I think, are general principles that anybody should be able to apply. But these specific ones, like walking and riding bikes, again, if it's specifically the idea of lowering carbon emissions, I get it. I mean, going out for walks is always a good thing, right? To be active. But for this specific reason, again, I don't know. It would be tough to give a specific piece of advice to people from different areas that, I'm not familiar with their areas. So yeah, I can't really say that.
Thank you so much, though, because you've given a lot of food for thought there. Okay, so we've been discussing about different things to do with the environment, and something that I've been wondering about, and Fizzer as well, is that we don't feel like we have any leaders when it comes to the environment in our communities. So, the other day my son was saying he wants to work in the weather office. And I was like, yeah, why not? But, do we have anyone who actually works in the Met Office or who is in that field? I personally don't know anyone. So I guess what I'm asking is, do we need scholars who are doing a bit more research on the environment and how we as human beings can be making changes? Or do we need people in our community who take the lead, start getting educated in this field and working to lead the community in the right direction?
So the short answers are yes and yes. Both, you need scholars and you need lay people as well. So there's two parts of this. So one is, again, going back to the idea of framework, right? Is there are obviously a lot of, trending things going on, hashtag this and that, get involved in this sort of issue. In terms of what problems exist and how we should look at it, we have to, again, I feel, in my humble opinion, we have to be careful of not using other people's frameworks for determining what is a problem, what is not a problem. And I'll give the most recent example that, especially after everything that's been going on in the US, racism has been the biggest issue. And I mean, I'm sorry to put it like this, but almost every single week, workshop, seminar, just racism. How do we get racism out of our communities? This happened I'm still seeing sessions happening about this, right? Ulama are being asked, address the issue. It's a problem in our community. And I'm not going to denounce, of course it is an issue, but the framework that's being used to bring it up is not our framework. The way that racism comes about in, let's say, non-Muslim or non-Islamic societies is different than what happens in our communities. And I've spoken about this in other sessions, but I actually don't think that the way that it is a problem in other places, we don't have that same problem. But then what happens is we take their framework and then we create problems where they don't exist. So I think the same thing needs to be done as well regarding the issue about the environment. Is we need to see, once we have the proper Islamic framework, which now goes into the first part, ulama, a proper scholar needs to be able to help us frame how to look at those things. Again, normally these conversations don't happen in our centers And there's a lot of information that's here. Like there's a lot of works. I mean, I think probably a good one for people to start would be looking at Ayatollah Jawadi Amali, Hafadullah. He has a book on Islam and the environment. And yeah, it's heavily theoretical, but again, he's coming at it from more of this metaphysical place that people need to see. What is my role as a man in the cosmos in terms of a divine being connected to Allah? Like that's important, because then we get to see, okay, now from a Islamic framework and outlook, what do I do about, all the things like water wastage or trees and things like that? We have our own ways to deal with this. So we have our own problem detecting system, or I guess like problem detector, whatever. And then we also have our own solutions too. And this is something that a lot of ulama, like Ayatollah Jawadi and many others, Agha Parsania, Hamid Parsania has also been pushing, is that not everybody agrees with, but it's something that I do wholeheartedly believe, is that we need to kind of we have Islamic sciences, right? Islamic environmentalism, Islamic chemistry, Islamic biology, Islamic, meteorology, right? If we're talking about being a weather person, there are ways of approaching this, because Islam, again, is trying to tell us about how to examine reality. And again, I would even extend this to the idea of, mental health and all this stuff too. There are Islamic ways of approaching that requires individuals, ulama, especially if they take the more metaphysical, philosophical, irfani approaches. That framework needs to be given, needs to be explained to the individuals, by a trusted scholar. Then you can say, now, okay, if you decide to go out in the world, now it comes to the lay individuals. You go out and study meteorology, you go out, become a doctor, whatever, you want to be a therapist, an engineer, all of that stuff. Look, what we are learning in our universities, and I don't like to use the word liberal universities, but I'm sorry to say, I mean, that's what it is. They're modern and now they're more postmodern than anything else, is the idea of reality is breaking down. I mean, there's very little left that's real in the kind of public discourse. But again, like we said, Islam is trying to show us we need a framework for real. Let us show you, how does something really look? I always, because a lot of my friends in Qom, they always disagreed with me about this. So they said, what would this actually look like? I said, think about something like, what does an Islamic car look like? The West has pretty much designed that, or an Islamic internet system. My guess, a hypothesis, is that it would look completely different to what we see in front of us, because the same nafsani or egotistical tendencies that can come about in these things, a properly executed Islamic system would not allow for that to happen. Again, sort of maybe a more substantive example. It's always been an issue, right, about animal treatment when it comes to testing, right, for like lotions and creams and foods and things like that. Oh, animal testing is unethical. Okay, one would surmise, they guess that possibly with an Islamic factory or Islamic system and Islamic chemistry, this stuff, because of our duty to other creatures, this stuff would not have been allowed. For example, right? I'm not saying that that's the case, but I'm saying that's a framework that a Muslim would take while they're determining their level of experiments and things like that. So this should also extend out to these discussions as well. So again, to kind of summarize what we were saying over here, is that our activism needs to be an Islamic activism, not a foreign sort of activism from any other source. Yes, our ulama need to study a lot of these things, which they don't. I mean, look, fiqh and usul, to some degrees, I have my own ideas about that, but it doesn't seem as necessary as it was. These other sciences, which take these things from a higher approach, more students, for those who may be listening, I think they need to focus on that and see how we can kind of, realize that, look, Islam is our main, we say, dominant framework. If you want to take in an empirical framework, fine, but it has to be subsumed under an Islamic framework. Like, we have to be very careful of allowing a scientific or empirical, materialistic framework to dominate over our Islam. And that's what's been happening for many, many years, unfortunately. And again, now the worst case is what's happening is a postmodern framework is doing that instead. So we're lucky if we find modernist Muslims. Now we have postmodernist Muslims to deal with as well, unfortunately. So yes, Our Lady should, if there's ulama that can discuss these things, and I think we have a few works by ulama that can at least get us started, like the ones I mentioned from Ayatollah Jawadi. That's a starting place. And then in terms of getting out there and doing the work, if they have those frameworks in mind, or at least know that it exists, or they're working side by side with the ulama in their area, or somebody, a spiritual advisor, so when they actually go out to universities, they won't succumb to these, again, foreign sort of ideas. They'll understand, I've got a framework. So when, this professor or this, Freud says this, or, this theory says this, I know that, look, within an Islamic framework, this is not correct. I'll take the tools that may be there, but I'm going to, again, filter it through the Islamic lens. And again, that is not an easy thing to do. This is something that even in Qom, the house has been pushing for this on certain individuals, like Ayatollah Jawadi. They've been trying to get ulama to do this for a while. There's been some pushback of this, Islamicization or Islamification of sciences. Sayyid Hussein Nasr talks about these types of ideas as well. There's many individuals who talk about it. But again, not everybody agrees with that. They say, look, let the West, or Islam and mathematics are separate, Islam and biology is separate. If that's your opinion, then again, you're just going to be taking a separate framework, and then this question would be very easy for you. But if you believe that Islam actually is the true, real framework, the only framework, then I think the answer is there's a lot more work that we'd have to do. And we need to get our community members, as cliche as it is, okay, doctors are great. We need something beyond that, right? Getting in finance for a few people, that's great. But there's so many areas, right? Now people talk about we need more poets, we need more artists, politicians. Well, that's always debatable. I guess it depends where we are. But all these other backgrounds in life and career paths, Muslims really need to be, divided like that. And again, this usually goes back to the idea of walaya and community. If you have an alim that's able to advise people, say, look, your skill sets are like this, you should go into, again, climatology. Your skill sets are like this, you should become a doctor. Your skill sets like this, you become a biologist, or et cetera, or media, whatever it is. But we don't have that framework right now, again, because subconsciously we still have that Western framework of do whatever you love, rather than do whatever God loves for you. And that is part of your actual divine obligation and duty based on what is going to be there for you to, in one sense, help the Imam at the time when he, inshallah, returns. Or again, in the grander scheme of things, put things back in harmony the way that Allah wants it.
Inshallah, I really like that. I think also, since young age, if we try and encourage these kinds of thoughts because a lot of us I come from an Arab background, and for us it's like, if you don't do the sciences, then you're not smart. That's why you couldn't do the sciences. Mm-hmm. And I've had experiences where because I studied English, it's like, okay, so she probably didn't get her grades, but no, that's not the way it is in England, obviously. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, if from a young age we change our attitude and change how even our relationship with nature. So I love gardening, and I wanted to ask you, how important is it that we become green-fingered and we adopt gardening? Or, even if you don't have a garden, there's all sorts of ideas now of window boxes or plants in your house. How important is this? Because personally, it helps me tremendously. So how important is it to be encouraged more in our communities?
Again, I can say on a theoretical basis, it is a very important thing. It could be, and it should be emphasized, but I have to be careful too, because for various reasons, we haven't been able to implement the sort of, gardening and other types of things that we'd like to in our own home. But at the very least, we kind of recognize it, right? Once we, inshallah, we get a place or a home that's more appropriate for that, then we'll be able to do that. Again, at the very least, we know that looking at greenery has a positive effect on the soul. In addition, we've talked already, and we all know that everything is doing tasbih. And in fact, many of our narrations talk about the specific tasbih, the subh, that each individual creation is doing. Every animal has its own tasbih. Every plant, apparently, and flower has its own tasbih as well. So many of our ulama talk about that. Look, if you want, all these various types of, in the same way that, people, when they have a housewarming, whatever, they have people over reciting Quran, or you want people to recite the, majlis for Imam Hussein, or, we have all these things. We want our houses to be blessed. It's not just from human blessings. It's from these other creatures as well. In a Q&A for one of our sessions last night for this center, somebody asked about cats. And I said, look, cats, one of the blessings, according to some ulama, is that they actually ward off jinns because of the tasbih that they do. For example, there are certain birds that have a certain tasbih, which is beneficial to the soul. I mean, for those who are more into the la'nat stuff, there are certain birds that do la'nat. If that's your thing, then okay, there's a bird that does la'nat. That's what you want to do, right? So having that greenery is going to bring extra sort of barakah there. And again, because of the connection that we don't have, that gives us a piece of that prophethood. Again, we talked about prophets before, right? They were connected with all types of nature. They like sheep and everything else, right? So they were always there too. So this gives us a closer introspective look at what it feels like to be a khalifa, that we're in charge of these individuals too. This plant, this creation of Allah, I have to flower it. I have to give it. So I have to do all this. I'm a maintainer for that. And it's not the same as, my children. There's a certain different thing here. So I have to adjust based on its needs. And sometimes it will grow. Sometimes it won't. Allah is the one who's, so all these concepts are tied there too. And I mean, look, even from a simple financial standpoint, it's cheaper to grow your own fruit and vegetables. Like, it becomes much more beneficial. You can get rid of all the toxins, which, again, maybe it's not so bad for you in the UK or in Europe, but here, that's everything that we're eating is toxins. It's all this Miracle Grow and all this garbage that people are eating. So a lot of ulama now have been starting their own gardens, and they've been pushing this for people that, look, get space. Make sure if you get a house, one of the necessities is try to get space for a garden, whatever it can be, so that you can grow a few of your own things. Again, you save money. It does tasbih for you, and that spiritual connection to that specific thing, that plant or flower, the fruit, vegetable, whatever, that'll be beneficial. And of course, if you have kids, it's one of the best ways to teach responsibility, right? To show that, look, you can maintain these creatures as well. I mean, so we did that with our eldest daughter. We got her one of those, like grow kits, basically, right? So there's sand and the soil and everything. So we planted it together and put it out there. So we said, look, Rasulullah himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, would name everything, including like his sword had a name, animal, everything. He would give a name to it, again, to give it more of a humanistic feature. So I taught her the same thing. Said, look, Rasulullah did it. You should name it. Name your plant. So I mean, she chose grow. Okay, not the most creative name, but I mean, whatever. She's 5. I can forgive her for that. But she had a relationship. She went there to say salam alaikum. She would encourage it. Speak to it. So because I know that one of the other things to talk about is how we increase our relationship with the environment. Well, this is the way to do it. From a young age, if kids can be shown that, look, it's not just humans that respond to you, it's these creatures as well. And mentioning like the story of Nabi Sulaiman and the rest, all of these things tied together will say that, look, it's not just a human world. It's a whole divine creation of Allah that we have to build, greater relationships with.
Ahsan, thank you so much.
That's so beautiful. And I actually have heard our elders saying that we should speak to our plants and it helps them grow. So that's really sweet. I just want to change a little bit of the direction of the discussion, because much of today we've been discussing the natural environment. But I was wondering from an Islamic perspective if there's guidance on how our own internal environment that we live in, such as cleanliness of the home, as I vaguely recall a hadith regarding cobwebs in one home brings poverty. So do you have any thoughts about our internal environment?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's obvious to any Muslim that, tahara is or the extension of tahara, which is beauty, right? Is, Jamal and Jamil, right? All these names of Allah that we understand, that we try to manifest. Those are essential components. We have narrations that talk about Islam is a deen of tahara. That it's one of its main sort of principles there. So the way that, again, to kind of give it that metaphysical outlook, this is something that I think a lot of ulama have helped give us a framework that, look, sometimes what we end up doing, to kind of go back to the activist question as well, we end up jumping out to, taking care of the environment. Oh, I got to fix the environment, greenhouse gases, whatever. Said, okay, maybe before we do all that, we have to make sure literally our own house is in order. And that's why we have that sort of 3-pronged approach or 3-dimensional approach in Islam, right? First is, alaykum anfusakum. And the Quran says, look, you do you. You're responsible for yourself more than anything else. Once you, are to some degree if you perform your tazkiyatun nafs, you've cleaned yourself both physically and spiritually, which of course are tied together. Now you can move on to the next step, which would be, marriage. Marriage is taking these 2 nufus, 2 souls, putting them and saying, now there were certain, literally like a spot that I can't reach to clean. Now you as my spouse can help me do that. That's why, they say that this is one of the commentaries on, this is nisfuddin. This is half your deen to get married. Why? Because we always have our blind spots, both physically and spiritually. A spouse comes in and says, look, I'll show you where your weak spots, dirty spots are, and help you clean. And, vice versa. We do that for each other. And that is the smallest version of an ummah or jama'ah in Islamic community. It's 2 individuals, husband and wife. They develop that, clean, tahir relationship. And they also become mutahir because they're purifying one another. Now, once they reach a certain level there, then Allah says, now extend that and now branch out and now have children. When that happens, now you can give other individuals these tools so that they can, one is that you purify them by helping them, show them how to destroy their ego, purify their physical nature, their spiritual nature. Also, as parents, you would know this too, that especially in the 0 to 7 phase, the amount of like trials that we have in dealing with them, they help us purify more than anything, right? And sort of Islamic tarbiyah, and a lot of now, child developmental psychologists, the famous, social media influencers say this, is that parenting is not some reactive response to your child's behavior. It's really that you have to self-parent first and fix yourself. That in turn shows your child how to do it, right? If you want your child to destroy their ego, you have to show them, like, I'm destroying my ego, watch how I do it. And that's what a lot of parents end up missing out on, unfortunately. So, or in this analogy, it's that, this is how I wash myself spiritually. Now this is how you can do the same, right? And then, so now we've gone, right, from the self to now spouses, right, into the smallest thing. Then you build an Islamic family. Then once that happens, you take a collection of Islamic families, and that becomes now a community, an Islamic jama'ah. Now, with all the same principles in mind of cleanliness and tahara, the same principles are there. So now you can make it environmentally friendly, so to speak, right? You can make rules that, when we go to each other's houses, we won't watch TV or whatever it is, or we'll use more environmentally friendly things. You can start building, a co-op between each other. Hey, I have space in my garden to plant these vegetables, but I don't have space for these fruits. The other family says, look, we can do the fruits then. Somebody else can say, look, we can do these spices. So you start to, again, build up a community in the very technical sense, in the metaphysical sense, not just people who are in the same building, but people with the same exact divine goal who are trying to all together create that harmony using each other's skill sets. Literally the same, the different spaces that Allah has given them. Again, all the spots that they can't clean, they will come in and help clean that. So yeah, the poverty that can come about, again, you can take it very literally that, we'll lose money, or again, in a more metaphysical sense that there will be a lack in our environment that somebody else needs to come in and help us with. And that sort of faqr, or that dependence that we need, would only be taken care of either by a spouse, by children, extended family, or again, by a sort of tawheedi and divine community. And that's how together, again, that's why you have these, community cleanups. Right? That's the idea. Islam is about, when you develop an Islamic civilization, that jama'ah is you're trying to have this divine community cleanup. But of course, we still have to work on putting our shoes on the rack and putting our chai cups and garbage cans. We've got a long way to go. But starting small with the self is usually how we do it. And again, back to the activism thing, we have to be careful of shooting for these giant lofty goals right at the beginning. We've got our own stuff to deal with, and we can slowly branch out, and that will have its own kind of reverberations and take care of the greater picture, inshallah, with Allah's tawfiq providing.
Slowly but surely, inshallah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sayyid. Before we end, do you have maybe one takeaway thought for our listeners?
Takeaway thought. This sort of, let's say, environmental awareness or change in one's lifestyle, it's clear it's not easy. Whether it's nutritional, whether it's, again, walking, using less water. Some of the things may be easier for you to do depending on your level of willpower. Some things may be much more difficult. One example, because I know this was one of the questions that was provided and came to mind, was about dealing with bugs and insects. Look, I know I'm supposed to love Allah's creatures, but I hate bugs. I can't deal with them, right? So again, the theory is, sure, Allah, you made them, but I'm like, they're gross. I don't like them. I'm sorry, I don't know what else to say. And the first time we really had to deal with that was in Qum, staying at one of the ulama. So we temporarily were staying at their place, and their place was swarmed with ants. Like, it was really bad. And so, we had tried to clean it up with all the conventional methods, right? Like traps and sprays and all the very harsh sort of, like war on terror type of methods, right? Like just eliminating them. Very, like, almost had on a genocide. It was really bad. And then, of course, the teacher whose house I was staying at, when he found out, he said, "What are you doing?" And he told me about Alama Tabatabai, Rahmatullah alayhi, and the rest would say, like, you shouldn't be harming the insects. They're there. They're doing all this. And I was like, okay, I get that. So it was slow, but I'm like, okay, I have to be careful what that means. So it took me a little time, but I tried to, let's say, compromise there. I said, look, out in the real world, right outside, okay, we're sharing the world. Okay, I'm not going to come step on you. I'm not going to come mess with your house. We're sharing that. The compromise is this, is that, okay, if there's maybe one or two in the house, whatever bug it happens to be, if there's a way of taking them out, like literally taking them out, not like taking them out, like get rid of them, but taking them outside, okay, we'll try to do that. One or two ants is not a big deal. If it, is an actual issue, then it would go back to the other question that, Sister Fizza, you talked about cleanliness, because then that does come there, is that maybe the reason this is happening, right, because the cobweb hadith is there too. The reason that they're coming and perhaps making your house a home is because you're not doing a good job of doing it. Maybe they need to, encroach on your territory and do that. So I'm not going to lie. We do get rid of bugs. We have, use sprays and things like that, but we also try our best to make sure that it's within our boundaries. Now, the rationalization that I use is that, look, they're invaders. We have our rights in that sense. What can we do? But we try our best to make sure that it's a limited, not like boots on the ground approach. That okay, if we can deal with it in a nice, calm, loving way, we'll try to do that. If not, then Allah forgive us. Like, what can we do? But again, the greater point was that to try to get involved in that compassion and change lifestyle is a difficult thing. But as you said, like slowly, surely, these sort of baby steps, and figure out what are easy things for you to do. And sometimes, again, simple nutritional changes could be good enough. Maybe it's, again, walking a little bit more, driving a little bit less, or taking less trips. There's all these other kind of practical ideas. But the one thing that I think is necessary for that to happen, like we said right in the beginning, which I guess is a good ending part too, is to really make sure that your framework is proper, right? To see, am I wearing the kind of divine, godly, tawheedi lenses? Is that how I'm viewing reality? Or is it from more of a nafsani, egotistical, modern, postmodern approach that I get to determine what is right, what is wrong, what is clean, what is dirty, what is green, what is harmful to the environment? If we can reharmonize with what God actually entails, then I think that would make a lot of things easier. But that is probably one of the biggest struggles for a lot of us to do. So hopefully Allah give us all the tawfiq to help us do that, and give us that, help us see, as I think the hadith says, right, to see Allah and His creation as He wants it to be seen, right? The way, the haqqi ma'rifah, the way that it should be seen in reality.
Ilahi Ameen. Inshallah, we can be ones who always have our tawheed lenses on. Sayyid Hasan Ali Rizvi, we have come to the end of today's episode, and we would like to thank you so much for making time to discuss this really important topic with us.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you once again for the invitation. Just wanted to apologize if there's anything I said which, now there has to be trigger warning. So if anybody was triggered or offended by anything, then I do apologize. That wasn't my intention. So please forgive me for that. If there was anything that, let's say, maybe was offensive or confusing, then that would be my fault. And I would ask that you would try to give me the opportunity to try to correct that or make amends for that. And if there was any sort of benefit whatsoever, then all khair, all benefit, all manfa'ah comes from Allah. So we thank Allah for that benefit, especially in this month of Rajab.
Alhamdulillah.
And we want to thank you all for tuning in. Feel free to leave us a comment on our social media handles, and to find out more, please visit our website, thegoodtree.faith.
Till next week, fi amanillah.
Join us next week as we discuss our relationship with Imam Mahdi, Ajallahu Ta'ala Faraja'u Sharif, with Sayyid Ali Rizvi.